All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It is 2:00, so we shall call to order the meeting of the Land Use Working Group. It is Friday, September 5th. We are at the Ripley School for those watching online, just in case the environs looks a little bit different. So first item on the agenda is a roll call for the Land Use Working Group. Actually don't have an alphabetical list of the folks on the committee in front of me. So I will maybe work off of, do you have a list, Shannon?
Working on it.
I don't think there's an attendees list on the minutes. I think I've got a list. Yeah, roughly alphabetical. Okay, Paul Bone,
Present.
Keith Bergman,
Present.
Mary Hartman,
Here.
Judith Long, here. Tracy Morano,
Present.
Paul Alameda, sorry, Paul, out of order.
Rob.
Rob Alameda, thing.
Yeah.
Mark Martinez,
Not here.
Sven Reber.
And Linda
Also
Miller
absent.
needs to be added.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm working off this
Yeah.
minutes list. Linda Weber, Linda Miller, pardon me, here.
You got everyone.
I think that's everyone. Yeah, so I'm sort of working off this list. It was based on who was present at the last meeting. Excellent. All right, onward. First item on the agenda is to approve the meeting minutes. Our last full meeting was on August the 18th. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Excellent, thank you, Carrie. All right, next item on the agenda is a discussion of,
Vote on that.
pardon me,
Yeah, you did.
all in favor?
No, you.
But roll call.
Yeah, because it's Rob's.
We have to roll
We can
call.
just
Okay,
say
yes.
ourselves. Linda
Yeah,
Miller.
their names, thank you.
Linda
Yeah.
Miller, aye.
Thank you.
Tracy Morano, aye.
Mary Hartman, I.
Cindy Paul.
Keith Bergman. Paul Bohm, aye.
Judith Long, aye.
Deb.
And Rob Alameda, thank you. Yeah, maybe you can screenshot that.
Yeah.
and just send it to me. Thank you. All right, so now we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the discussion of the tour that we just had of the Ripley building that was given to us by Superintendent Dr. Lori Hunter. So I open it to the floor, questions.
STEM room was nice.
The steam room, the
Nice.
steam room. Yeah, the steam room, not to be confused with the boilers.
Yes.
right?
That was nice. I think the question you asked at the end, Judith, was great, which is, not just what do we have now as far as space, but what do we need for programming? What's the current space and what are some future, thinking future, what might be the needs going forward? I thought that's what I'd like to see next.
Yeah, and I think we talked about, we have roughly 40 employees that are in this building. 5 classrooms of integrated preschool. Now, many years ago, it was only 2 half-day classrooms, now we're at 5. And integrated preschool, those are mandated programs. So just that's to consider. We also have the launch space here, the STEAM lab. So we can certainly work on what our current needs are and maybe our future needs. I think the expansion of the integrated preschool has been fairly significant. I do think that people move to Concord for special ed services, so my guess is it would be more than 5. I don't think we'd ever have 10, but it'd be more than 5. And I do think it's also one of the most cost-effective preschools in town, if you're paying for preschool.
The current program space is, I guess, straightforward to figure out.
Mhm.
Just thinking of the future ones, given the inefficiencies and what struck me about the building is that the layout is just so inefficient.
Yeah.
To make that, to have the same activities, people, programs, in a different building, it's not a 1-for-1, but it's a good start, I guess.
Yeah, and then maybe it's something like, 6 integrated classrooms, 2 speech and language spaces, a physical therapy space, an occupational therapy space, launch space, 3 conference rooms, and then we figure out the office space. And I think we can pretty quickly get that done.
It's kind of true though that if you look at this building, if you look at 55 Church, if you look at the Council on Aging, there's a lot of inefficient use of space.
Mm.
That's kind of all over. So I think getting a good feel for what is the space that people would really need to run an efficient department is gonna be challenging. I didn't find that in the TDA report as far as what would be, you know, for a town our size, what would a good Council on Aging square footage look like? And yet, I'm getting into data, but, so, and just when I saw the way, how inefficiently we're using our space right now. It makes me wonder, there's just gotta be some savings some places, and then other places, there's opportunities to expand, so.
And I think all of these spaces have been inherited in
Yeah.
ways, right? So it's kind of like there was no planning that was done. It was like, oh, let's make this the admin building and put a preschool here. Because it used to be a school and it just, I mean, everybody's inherited these spaces.
I think one thing that concerned me was, looking at the, document in terms of the, what was written up by the group of architects and engineers about the space, is that it's, a little bit of, I would call it lipstick on a pig. You know, it's, the building is not failing, but it's not meeting its needs, and yet there's a substantial amount of investment that should be made in the infrastructure. And then the question is, well, what is the ongoing maintenance, and what is the cost to the town to have this infrastructure to serve what are clear needs and requirements, but that this building doesn't really effectively serve. And then why would we want to expand the use of this building to make it more efficient when, again, it may be very costly to operate this building from its current status to a status that would be more efficient and productive and valuable to the community overall.
There are a couple of wildcard spaces in here. There's the town space, I don't even know, which isn't being used, so it's not
Yeah.
school space, so that. I mean, it's accounted for in the overall building square footage, but, you know, so the town space would be important to understand because it's not being used.
No, and I think, you know, if they were talking about moving carousel or something, that might be a use of town space, but I mean, it's not being used.
Carousels,
It's on the
Move
other
that,
side, yeah.
and also the case.
Case collaborative, so a collaborative program is, it is for efficiency and special education, so multiple towns, you know, spend money into Case Collaborative, they rent this space from the town of Concord. Because we have this space. If this building went away and we didn't have the space, they'd have to find space in one of the member towns. So it's, you know, Concord, Acton, I think Stowe. I'm gonna get it wrong, but all of those towns contribute to Case.
Yeah, so that's the other wild card, you know, looking
Yeah.
at town occupancy, town needs, you gotta subtract. I'm sorry, school occupancy, school needs, you gotta subtract case, and you gotta subtract the
Mhm.
town space.
Yes.
And then you have the combined program and administrative spaces.
Like Case, I think some of their classrooms are in Acton. And it just because Acton has space in some of their schools that they can house that, so all the member towns work together to figure out who's gonna host what. The preschool might be in Acton, the, you know, elementary program might be in another town. We house the administrative portion of it, so there's an agreement. And I would have to see what that agreement looks like too.
Keith, any thoughts?
I think that since the town has this land use working group going on right now, it would be it would be now or never to also include the schools, other, you know, uses in that discussion, because there are what I've been calling once in a generation decisions that are gonna get made. And if, for example, we were we saw that, town functions were gonna be consolidated in fewer than 18 buildings. You know, would there, would there be room for the school administration too? Could be, let's see what the building blocks look like and how the pieces all fit together. And then at the end of the day, what buildings can the town deaccession because they're not meeting the needs of the, or that the needs can be met with fewer structures. So come on, jump on.
So I think the question of the Ripley building from the perspective of the initial charge of the land use working group is to evaluate its fitfulness for either municipal consolidation in some way, shape, or form, which broadly includes, by the way, the work of the school district, whether or not it's suitable for public safety uses, whether or not it's suitable for public works. And I think that this tour confirms what many of us probably felt about this building based on being in the building over the last, 20 years been in town. The kids have been here. So the building itself, to me, structurally, this is, I think the term used by the folks who operate the building, I can't remember, is it Tim? Tim's building called it end of life. I think very clearly this building is towards the end of its material capabilities, so meaning materials are failing. Renovating it, I think the existing format is incredibly inefficient. It's not intensively used. It's also an inefficient layout with regard to circulation and so forth. So renovation doesn't seem like a particularly cost effective strategy for reusing the building. So that's one initial impression. Another impression is about the site and the location and its, its sort of merit for other uses. And I know all of the subgroups are considering the different properties from their perspective. I think that the public safety group, for example, would probably not be looking at the Ripley site for fire or police because it's simply too far on one side of town to meet the service requirements. So I think the building itself is in questionable condition. The site itself, interesting, so we'll definitely be thinking about it as we move forward with the land use group work. But I think a really important piece of this is, what does the school board want? And the school board is clearly running, outside of the quality of the building, they're running some high quality programs here. And when we ask all of the different town functions from public works to fire, and so on forward, when we ask them to think about their needs, I think it's really important not to just focus on existing needs. So we can ask the school folks, for example, to think about what square footage are you using for each of these programs now. But I think a much better question is to ask about, how do you see these programs growing in the future?
Yeah.
How could you, using the STEAM classroom, which is so exciting and innovative, how could that become an even bigger part of our curriculum if we expanded the space by 50% or some such, right? So really having the school board think about all of these different aspects of how the space is used and what that might look like for them 10 to 15 years in the future. And then we have the complicating factor of there's different users in the building. We have the town, we have the school board, we have, I think does the regional school board have anything here? So they don't have anything here.
No, we just meet here, but, so we went through this process before to renovate this building. We have to charge Carlisle something
Right.
because we have regional services in the building. So Lori's salary gets paid by Concord and Carlisle, so there's a calculation to split. And it all changes based on October 1 enrollments. Now, the other piece that I think that people haven't talked about is any new housing coming on board. Will be an influx of students into the schools. They might be younger students, but we have no idea what's gonna happen. But we have to consider that with any new housing coming on board.
Absolutely. And by the way, we'll have some data updates to report
Okay, good.
on later on. So
But one last thing, clearly we're thinking about this on the municipal group, but I'm thinking into the phase 2 of this project. This is a great site. I mean, this is like 18 acres and it's flat.
Mm.
I mean, it's great recreational right now, so. Speculate, but some, like a recreational complex, we don't, this would be just a great site for something like that. In town,
Indoor, outdoor, youth center, put it all here.
indoor or outdoor, yeah,
Right.
just,
You know, one thing I noticed when we walked through this building and all the other places that I've toured is how hard the people who work here have made do with the space and how creative they've been with the space. And I'm wondering, what work do we have ahead of us to help people understand the benefits of the move? Okay, because I think some people are very comfortable where they are. They've done a lot to make it their space, maybe not here as much as the other town facilities. So, you know, we're looking at this in terms of square footage and head count, things like that, but we also need to take into consideration the people and how they're going to feel about moving. So that's something that I'm concerned about. I mean, I've been, in my career, I've been in so many system changes, you know, enhancements where you thought you did this great software program and the people hated it. So I wanna make sure we don't ignore, you know, we have to keep, I'm gonna keep that, I'm gonna put that out there now and keep it in the back of our mind.
Well, you and I did the assessor's office together. like,
That's right.
And then look at that, they really love their space over there.
Everybody
I
does.
was feeling so guilty. This building, I'm not sure everybody really loves their space, you know, that we're just not putting any more money into this building.
Yes, that sometimes, as it's the charm of distance, it's that, can you imagine departments that have been able to function, miles away from the town, I'll say town manager, and, that when you consolidate departments and people are closer because it serves the organization better, it
Yes.
serves how we serve the public.
Yes,
Yes.
Then that is a different experience than the employer is gonna find that they're having a different experience.
yes,
One of the most amazing moves that I ever saw was, and unfortunately it was temporary, but you know, I was town manager in Provincetown, the next town over, Truro, building a new town hall, and for 2 years, they were all in a shared space. At, I think it might have been in the basement of the library or something, but you have never seen a more efficient operation. They were all there together, they were all sharing the space, and there was one point for the public and to interface with them, and everyone was there, and they got along so well, and then when they moved into the new building, it was back, all right, everyone back to your corners. And don't interact anymore.
And I do think that happens. I mean, there's a lot of like, everybody emails each other because you can't get up and walk to see somebody else. When I first moved here, I think about what the townhouse used to be. And you would walk in and you could, you know, pay your taxes, you do recycling, you'd be talking to people, like it was very
yes.
open down there. And it feels very different.
If you drop the, you know, I think early on asked the question of, are we only looking at, you know, at like owning properties, and what about leasing, you know, that if you have unused, underutilized office space, and you were to lease it, and because it's cavernous and big, that you could put everyone together, it does that. And that it's within walking distance, so, you know, places to have lunch. Would that be a more useful end result for what we're doing here? Especially if there are, you know, there's a lot of decision, there's a lot that goes with building and renovating new. And the expense that comes from that compared to what would be an annual expense for lease, so.
can I get back to what Mary said? I think you're right, we have to at some point talk to people about it. But I'm just wondering, is this our scope, you know, is our scope just to figure out a sort of a antiseptic macro level,
Yeah,
what the possibilities are, or, you know, because you can,
that's a good point.
you can go.
Yep.
It has to be done before any
People-
implementation,
Exactly.
but as far as a high level planning, you know, it's, we
No,
have to make certain assumptions.
I was just thinking it would, if I'm thinking ahead, it would be one of our recommendations that needed to be seriously
Yeah.
considered. I don't think it's our job.
Yeah, my tendency would be to agree with the idea of managing expectations with regard to the amount of work that we could do that would be gathering qualitative data, like, you know, interviews and people's impressions about what location they might prefer relative to another. But there are certain attributes of consolidation, which is a fairly well-studied phenomenon in the context of facilities management, from Google on down, right? They really understand the efficiencies of having people close together and when to siphon off and create a back office for a certain kind of function. So I think that we will be able to tap into some of the major arguments in favor of consolidation, as well as a cost benefit, a very rough cost benefit analysis around consolidation. But in terms of mapping the individual preferences of our staff, I think that we don't have time, but B, I think that the staff would need to take some leadership in
You're right.
helping us to understand, you know, how many people are super happy where they are? How many people have sufficient HVAC, which I think is actually really low relative to what, you know, a human standard might be. I think they're tough. And just, you know, taking some leadership on gathering some of those impressions and some of that data. I think the staff would be in the best position to take leadership there.
You relate to that and the location. We're never gonna find the perfect location, as if, you know, we have a clean slate, we can do anything anywhere. We have to figure out what plausible, reasonable. I mean, even, so we had Peabody in one end of town, you got Ripley here. For consolidation, it'd be great to have it right in town center, but that's not gonna happen at that scale, so. Like below, you mentioned location, I mean, I don't wanna mix it into our Peabody, that was. I asked Russ, what's the downside? He said location, and it is, but. You know, the benefits of that consolidation versus the downside of whatever, and location is something that, I think, Mary, that's something that at a macro level, we can address that.
Okay.
The benefits, you know, the individual pieces of that is something different.
I agree. And remember, we're making recommendations to the select board as well. And I imagine, you know, doing a strategy that we're sort of scratching the surface of, that is essentially a land management plan for even a town, you know, that is relatively small population like Concord. It's not done, you know, by a volunteer committee over a year. It takes longer than that to do. So I think we're really just trying to understand the broad contours of the issue and make some initial recommendations.
Yeah, it's so. Scope, we have
Yeah.
to be careful about.
Yeah, we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So lots of interesting, you know, thoughts and impressions. I think it's always helpful to do a site visit. And so again, I just want to thank Lori Hunter and the school board for making a site visit available for us today. There's no substitute for seeing the buildings.
Yes.
I'd like to invite anybody in the audience if they'd like to speak on the issue of the Ripley building in particular. All right, we can move on to the next item on the agenda. So next item is continuing to discuss, you know, conversations and sites. We did at our last land use working group meeting, we were lucky to have the MCI advisory board come into the first part of the meeting and help us to understand a little bit more about their work and where they are in terms of their timeline and some of the sort of pressures and urgencies that they are feeling so that they could help us understand how our work might best help them. So Sven and I, and again, Sven can't be here today because he's traveling in the UK, but we thought it would be useful to at least debrief a little bit about how people felt that conversation went, whether or not we have follow-up questions that we might want to pass along to the MCI advisory board.
Are the chairs meeting with the chairs? I mean, how is this integration gonna go forward? The integration between the work they're doing and the work that the land use working group is doing?
That's an excellent question. We have not discussed having the chairs meet with the chairs. I assume it's a continuing conversation. And when Sven is back at the end of September, and then I'm traveling, and so I think the idea is to maybe do the next step with MCI at the very beginning of October,
Okay,
which will also coincide with our first quarterly report to the select board. Keep
I think there's an issue that bubbles to the top here, no pun intended, the wastewater at MCI Concord, I think is the key issue. Glad Alan Cathcart is here today. I was actually, I was invited to a briefing that Sven and Sven from this group and the co-chair of the MCI was
Dan.
Dan, of course. Dan Gainsborough, and it was about it was a prep for the wastewater presentation that was made the next day to the subcommittee, to the Public Works Subcommittee of the Land Use Working Group. And it was very, I think it's probably the most important issue that we're dealing with and all the work that's being done, because it opens up because of what Alan has to share with both groups is that the capacity to expand wastewater for the entire town happens on the MCI / Junction Village property and nowhere else. And if so, what portions of that property are needed to produce what benefit for the community, for not just the things that we're looking at, but for actually the phase 2 stuff, commercial, economic development, and housing, and really development period in Concord, and being able to bring in additional revenues from other all the things that are important to the future of the community are at stake over solving the wastewater problem. So there are specific so whatever uses can get addressed can at the MCI site while also making I would dare say maximum use of whatever the potential is for that site to allow for wastewater. And just from what I see, that there's the opportunity for DPW to take some space in a no-build zone, grab it. If there's the opportunity to meet housing needs by going up instead of out, do it. And there's just so much benefit that comes from that. I think that the sooner the two groups wrestle with that issue, the better we'll have the context that all the other decisions will flow from.
So a question of clarification, you mentioned either we expanded MCI or nothing else. We haven't totally given up the sand filters and other possible permit issues at the main plant, have we, or?
No.
That's still,
Yeah, to speak to that, so there's been the concept of potentially doing a similar permit, groundwater discharge permit, at the existing facility off of Old Bedford. Is really gonna be a cost per gallon kind of discussion. The limit there is 155,000 gallons a day. We know that with some detailed geotech work. And what we're proposing, the considerations based on a conceptual assessment is somewhere between 150,000 and maybe 300,000 gallons a day at the MCI site. So those are the.
yeah, I don't want to guess what the MCI track, but just the.
Alan, at the site, at the sand pits, I guess, at the existing site, would that take existing farmland off?
No, the proposal is similar to MCI, the former sand beds, which have been
Okay,
at least, I know there's been generations of sand beds, but if you go to that site, you go to an aerial photo, you'll actually see the former, they're called intermittent sand beds at our existing facility. And we can't use them all, but some of them, and so that's where we're targeting 155,000 gallons.
But that does not take any farmland offline.
That wouldn't take any,
That was my concern.
that's right.
And I guess with the other point that I would make, and on the wastewater issue. The decisions about the MCI property are going to be made in our lifetime. And they're going to be made in the next year or so. So it's either now or never to say that you want to use, you want to expand the MCI wastewater to the maximum capacity, or you pass on it. And the fact that you may be able to do something else later. This will have, I'm convinced that this will have the full attention of the state. Because the state's looking for the town to stay in the wastewater business, so that the state doesn't have to, so that the three properties on the other side of Route 2. Which would get cut off if suddenly the wastewater system didn't work anymore, and and Alan's gonna tell us that it's a lot of. That not only do you need $25 million to upgrade the existing wastewater facility at MCI, but to connect the other state properties is gonna have to be massive investment that the state will need to make. So for the negotiations that are taking place in the immediate future between the town and the state about a wastewater solution. At MCI, I think you need to think big and you need to solve big. And if you can get, if you can add to the 310,000 gallons per day at the existing wastewater facility, another 300,000. Go for it. And if all you have to do is sacrifice some sand beds that you weren't gonna do a lot with anyway, on the combination of MCI and across the line over to the Concord Housing Development Corporation's Junction Village property. The solution for housing, as I say, is you build up. And what views of the Assabet River you will have over the if you do that for housing, so.
Yeah, and I wasn't disagreeing with that at all by bringing up the other issue, I'm just kind of broadening the topic. About the discussions that I've been involved with, and there haven't been a lot with the MCI advisory, the issue of municipal uses beyond the wastewater treatment plant are a little kind of fuzzy. What does that include? Pieces of public works or buildings, or is it just the wastewater issue? I know none of the scenarios that really had the municipal facilities in there, so I'm not sure where it stands right now in their thinking. It's out there, and I know Dan's thinking about it.
Yeah, I think we could certainly ask for some clarification, but my understanding based on reading the report and the extensive appendices is that municipal uses were considered separately in the context of the MCI planning relative to the issue of the wastewater treatment plant, which was sort of a carve out in the plan document. And in the plan document, it was treated like we're gonna separate the wastewater treatment plant and we're gonna let the town sort of figure that out on its own. And I think one of the challenges with that, and not tooting the horn of the folks at the select board who decided to create this committee, but I think that the value of creating sort of a checkpoint in the planning process has already sort of yielded through the discussion of the wastewater treatment plant relative to the timing of the MCI development as it's unfurling. There we go. Simply because, for example, in the agency report, which was, the consulting firm that did this report, it should have been very clear, because it is for every other wastewater treatment plant in existence, that there are negative externalities associated with wastewater treatment that would have had substantial setbacks associated with them. And those setbacks would have carved into most of the, sort of the site planning work that they were doing in the documents. So I think that the conversations that are now being had, and the opportunities that Keith was outlining that are becoming, available relative to even expanding potentially the wastewater treatment plant. I think that that's fantastic. And I just want to shout out to Alan Cathcart, who's been doing some excellent work on the staff side, helping us understand all of that information and getting us data in the time.
If I could, it's even more fundamental that I was very concerned with when our group started out and to see the initial negative reaction from some on NCI because, we were just coming along and wait a minute, some of the ideas that we were putting out there seemed at odds with all the work that they had done. And for me, wastewater is the solution to that friction. It's that, the building block of figuring out the future is the work that MCI did, and they gave us the building blocks to piece together. And the information about wastewater, expanding wastewater capacity, makes it clearer that some things need to be moved, or as I say, over or up in order to maximize the wastewater potential, which achieves economic development, not just on the MCI Junction Village site, but elsewhere in town. So I think that's a great solution for everyone to focus on.
Keith, I really think that your emphasis on wastewater is, well said, and I think the town is very aware of the constraint that our lack of wastewater capacity. But I wanna it's easy for us sometimes to think that we're the MCI advisory board, and we're not, we're the land use working group. And our job is to find homes for DPW, for public safety, and possibly consolidate town offices. So our interest in what's happening with wastewater might be helpful to think, we just want to know what is the select board and what are the negotiations with DCAM look like as far as how big of a buffer, and is that a good space for DPW? I think we might be making it broader than our job. So, and likewise for the consolidation, we might want to think about the warden's house. Am I saying the right word?
Back and forth between wardens and super.
Whatever it is, that's beautiful.
That's
That's beautiful. Okay, that might be, okay, so we wanna know, is that part of, what is MCI, what is the negotiations between the town, the select board and DCAM gonna do with that building? So that's what we need to know. These conversations are great, and I agree with you, but
But the part
we
of
just need to know.
the part I'm being quiet about is the news that everyone in the room ought to have, though, and that is that when we were on our tour of MCI Concord and couldn't find Alan, Alan was looking at the answer.
Yes, he was.
He was looking at the answer, which is a
That's Alan's job.
a structure into which DPW can move an existing building that happens to be in the 300-foot no housing, no build zone. It's already there, so that's one. I'm really good with that, and not to jump, and if there's two other, and if there are two other easy or simple, obvious solutions for police and fire, let's just say it and let's just cut to the chase. I'm very happy with what I'm hearing about what the other groups are doing, and if they've got those solutions, let's just, without further ado, let's put them on the table. The one,
I'll be out of here,
Yeah, well,
30.
the one.
Wait for the
It's
update.
very fun.
Wait for the update.
Well, we're done. We're gonna finish the conversation. We will invite a commentary from other folks in the room in just a moment. I just want to make sure that we've heard from everybody. I do appreciate, Mary, that, we do want to stay on scope, but I think that this is a particular site that required a little bit of technical understanding so that we could figure out if there was a little spot. for DPW and, yeah, so I think that
Okay.
that's just been excellent, excellent and timely and quick work, which has been helpful. Does anybody else from the committee have a comment on the discussion with MCI Concord? All right, I'd like to open it up to you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I did the tour of, the fire and the safety departments. And in particular, I'm concerned about the West Concord Fire Station. When you look at the heat map, it is a hub. And a lot of our major housing in the development of MCI is all gonna be happening around that hub. So I personally, and maybe again, I would like to see the MCI property looking at as a possible location for that fire station. And I don't know, for those of you who are on the select board, like how do you make that barter between these two committees?
Well, I can certainly speak to that first, so I can give you a little bit of update. So we also have, we have 3 working groups, one of which is Public Works, which we've already spoken about some of that work already. Then another is municipal consolidation. Talked a little bit about that. The one thing we haven't really talked about is the public safety work group, which is looking at the police and fire and associated public safety facilities in town. I assure you that the West Concord Fire Station is very much on our radar. In the context of the MCI discussion, our public safety work group at our very last meeting, August 22nd, I believe, we invited both the police chief and the fire chief to come and speak with us. I believe it was the police captain, however, who came. Nonetheless, we had two experts from those areas, and we talked about how they engaged the possibility of the MCI site for either police and fire. And the response from both of the representatives was that the location was not ideal. So that they had reviewed, which I know is surprising, right? Because we think, oh, boy, it'd be easy to get everywhere in West Concord. But in fact, they suggested that going to MCI would be tricky for a fire, because we were thinking about a West Concord substation, right?
Mhm.
Like not the full on, headquarters, but a sub fire station. And they said it actually, from a location point of view, would be likely to increase the response time rather than maintaining it or decreasing it. So they had conversations with the MCI work group during their planning process. And that was the initial reaction. So very much on the radar being paid attention to, but I think that particular location has been indicated as maybe a little bit too far. So then I turn it over to the representatives of the select board for any additional.
Well, I'm waiting to hear what the public safety group comes up with.
That's right, that's
We
right.
have ideas.
Because I've had conversations with the police chief and he said, well, excuse me, the fire chief, before he retired, he had other ideas. So I don't want to mention those here. So I think there are other possibilities to get modern expansions of the fire station in the right places. In the right places.
Yeah, very much an important issue that people are paying attention
So I
to.
have the MCI overlap with the wardens. Do we have any information, Mary, on the wardens building, superintendents, and I don't want to get into our subgroup discussion.
What do you mean?
Well, square footage, do we have the
Les
plan
had square footage,
for that? Cause I
It's
haven't.
off the top of my head right now.
No.
but you did when we were there, I remember.
We have those.
Maybe we should hold that,
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
feel like
Thank you.
we're
We'd
not
have
giving
a-
the subgroups much to talk about.
Yeah, that's right.
Of
Go
their
ahead.
updates.
Well, this is a
But
beautiful.
this is the
matrix
nature of this particular work,
Yeah.
that it's all woven together, yet we're kind of treating it separately for the initial purposes anyway. Did that at least
Thank you.
answer your question in the
Yes,
short term?
thank you very much.
Anybody else? Questions? Anybody online? All right, excellent. So let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is reports from the subcommittees, which of course we've now, given a little bit of a pre-feature to. But how about, we can start with municipal consolidation and then we'll do public works.
Yeah, I was gonna do
I've
that.
not been at the meeting, so I'm not playing
Yeah.
animals.
That's the first
You
thing.
guys-
we
you
wrote
guys
in the
chime in.
report.
Let me give you the macro version, so we're in the process of finalizing our needs assessment, and we've touched on a lot of the needs here, and I'll just mention them quickly. And there are a lot of really good reasons for consolidation, the economics, reducing costs, operational costs, the communication efficiencies, customer service. If you vacate certain buildings, you can repurpose those buildings and realize revenue potential from those buildings. And then there's a possible reduction of FTEs in terms of the consolidation, which, Mark Martinez right off the bat asked that question earlier. I mean, there are, and whether it's HR or IT or other, so I mean, there's lots of, I think we're gonna finalize that at our next meeting, the needs assessment, which Mary authored was great. What we have done, we're pretty much into the finishing the first layer of the inventory of staff at various locations, including school staff. We are a little fuzzy on program issues. It came up, so we know, and for example, in Turing Peabody, the Council on Aging has some interest in there, so the big programming for Council on Aging is programming for at least the integrated schools and the Harvey Wheeler, part of Harvey Wheeler, if that is vacated, there's the Concord Carousel in there. So there's lots of programming issues, which you really haven't factored into the square footage yet. But we've kind of identified at a first layer, which people can be moved, not individuals, or which activities and which can't be moved. So we've taken library off the table, we've taken fire and police off the table because those are other issues. There's some others that can't be, but we've identified about 130 people that are movable, and that's really rough in various locations. And then we've identified what town buildings might be vacated and repurposed, and we're trying to get specific information on those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buildings as far as square footage and other really economic details on that, and operational costs, et cetera. And a lot of that's out there. Carrie, the volunteer that Matt would take a crack at filling in this matrix that we produced. And then we've identified, I think at the first level, I'll call the receiving locations, if there was consolidation. And the big three, I mean, Ripley was on that before this tour was, so Ripley was on that radar as a consolidation target and maybe off the consolidation list. But Peabody is certainly on that list. And the Warrens building is certainly on that list. And then the other wild card is leasing possibilities as a consolidation option. So those are kind of all out there as sort of our long list. So we're still relatively early. We're getting very specific data on those buildings, operating costs, potential leasing costs if the town is to lease office building, and then potential revenue generation if we can from the buildings that are vacated. So, they're moving pieces, but I think we have a general plan of where we're going. But a lot of details to fill in. Did I miss anything?
No, you did great. Just one thing to add was that we need to finalize the criteria we use to evaluate the sites.
Yeah.
Right? And we've got operational savings, we've got customer service improvements, we've got cost savings, we've got flexibility. So we need to lay out what is the criteria we're gonna use. So we talked about it, but we should finalize it.
And to Keith's point about identifying a solution going forward, we're not too far away from identifying. The pieces, the movable pieces and where they move, so.
Yeah,
Do you want me to try and get before our next meeting, try and get kind of what the needs are in this building for Ripley?
Definitely.
Yeah, okay. All right, go before you do that.
And so we're gonna have to get all the program spaces, the other schools and then Council on Aging program spaces. We're gonna have to get that information, because we don't have that.
Yeah, we have current, we don't have what they could use for a town our size with our demographic. We don't have that.
I believe Mark has his hand up online. Mark?
You know,
Guys, can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Can you hear me? Hey, Paul, I got a follow-up question. And that is, when you think about consolidation, what are you doing as far as estimation of population, staff size, FTE? Are you building a model for 15 and 20 years out? Are you trying to solve that issue? Or are you just looking at current sort of needs and current assessments and current FTEs?
I think we're starting with the current inventory, but you're right, we have to project, we have, much like we have to talk to the schools about school growth and programmatic needs, we need to look at either a municipal staff growth, or municipal staff reduction, you know, or municipal staff level loading over the next, you know, period. So we haven't tackled that yet, but you're right, we have to do that.
I will remind us that Carrie spoke a little bit about anticipated FTE growth at the town going forward. FTE for folks in the audience is full-time employees. And she expected that it would stay flat. She anticipated that it would stay flat for the near to medium term. So I'm assuming that's at least a 5-year window. I know that doesn't necessarily answer longer term questions, which are also important, but they are anticipated to stay flat for near to medium.
But, you know, Mark, apropos of your question you asked earlier, I do think between HR resource and IT resource and some others, and administrative resources, with the consolidation, there'd be significant efficiencies, put it that way.
Yeah, Judith, not to share any sort of subcommittee secrets, but I thought that one of the things we were trying to work on is sort of some population estimates going forward. And again, I don't know how anyone can assume flat population with the 240Bs, MCI at a minimum of 300 units. I don't see how it is flat, and I don't think it's going to be flat in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well,
So-
to be, I think it's not, it's flat FTE growth, Mark, not flat population growth.
But municipal.
Yeah, that's
not
municipal.
School.
Well,
Yeah,
but
municipal-
if we think about it, though, I mean, we can't have, say, I won't say can't, but we may not be able to keep our fire staff flat if we're adding 2,000 people, just to pick a
Yeah,
number. I'm not saying that's where we are.
Yeah, I
So,
think that's fair. I think there are certain segments that will have population related growth, but in terms of municipal administrative staff. Outside of, say, public safety, and certainly the school board, that the staffing levels would stay relatively flat. Not population.
and Judith, are we still gonna try to come up with maybe some population estimates and then sort of share them with people and sort of bring everyone together on some sort of consensus as to population? And I 1,000% agree with you, because it drives school board decisions, it drives police and safety as well as EMT. I just think at some point, hopefully sooner than later, we agree on what the service needs are based on projected population. So we're hopefully solving a sort of a pathway that's 15 to 20 years in the future.
Yeah,
So that we don't
absolutely.
end up, making decisions today and, 5 years from now, we're saying, why the heck did we think we could put everyone in Peabody, for example, when that wasn't realistic based on some of the assumptions that were embedded in the population growth estimates?
Yeah, completely fair. And I know we've been talking about the population projections for a while. And I will report when we talk, I'll report more when we talk about the data part of the agenda. But we've got some preliminary estimates, but the town, generally speaking, does not produce population forecasts, which has been part of the challenge. So we're trying to work with state level forecasts and adapting them to the local level. So all I can say is we're making forward movement, but the town does not routinely produce those kinds of estimates that would allow us to make the kinds of, sort of forecasts on police and fire, et cetera, which are per capita dependent, hiring components. So working on it, Mark, and important, as you mentioned. All right, anything else from anybody in the audience? Before we move on to, actually, we're not finished all our subgroups yet, are we? I feel like we've talked about everything. So, Linda, if you wouldn't mind, I know that you've only had one meeting and it's Linda's first meeting, so.
Right, right.
In the hot
And I
spot,
think
but
Rob is on the line as well. We had an
He's welcome.
organizational meeting, but didn't elect a chair, so I'm in the room, but but Rob will correct me with anything that I forget. So primarily, we had the organizational meeting. We had a substantial discussion with Alan with regard to the wastewater treatment situation, which I think has been gone over, but I think our purview is slightly larger than the MCI facility, and really we think went through categorically a lot of the shortfall of the other public works facilities, particularly on Kais Road. And then we went through and tried to garner what information we could as to what other public works locations there are that may or may not be suitable, but that we just don't really think about all the time. So that was I think a sort of a superficial look there, but something that we need to follow up on. And then we began to think about what other locations and properties that the town might own or have control of that as well might be under our consideration. So it was a sort of a very basic lay out the map sort of meeting with a deeper dive in terms of the MCI site. And you know, if you put all of those numbers together, if we're talking about, Alan will correct me, 1.3 million at the Bedford facility in terms of gallons per day. Is that
Yes, so it's 1.2 million.
1.2?
The existing permit allowance.
Okay, and then on, you know, a possibility of 150 to 300 and 10 coming online from MCI, hopefully the 310. Then if you add the sand beds for 150 there, and then you add sand beds perhaps at Bedford for 155. So there's a lot of potential to think about that could represent addressing community needs. So we're just, but again, we're just trying to lay out the map and move to our next meeting. But Rob, would you like to add anything as well?
No, I mean, I think you hit everything on the nails on the head there, but I'd like to sit down with Alan and look at a couple other things, just to get my head wrapped around the uses and, you know, a couple ideas I have kicking in my head of projects I've seen in the past and what other towns have done to see if it is even a possibility to even, you know, bring it forth, or it's just a waste of time to bring it up. So Alan and I, we're figuring out some time next week to talk.
Great.
great, thank you guys
Thank
very
you.
much. I think the Public Works Group has the challenge of getting started just a little bit later than the other groups, but also has all this stuff happening at MCI at the same time. So we appreciate the juggling that you folks are doing with your timeline.
I have a question. When the municipal group is looking at the various buildings and Kais Road, you know, so 141 is not Public Works, is planning it.
That's correct.
But 133 and 135, is that both, that's all defined as public
Correct.
works?
Yes.
Okay, so this, and
And as well as recently, facilities falls under the umbrella of Public Works,
which is not the Knox,
which is over Knox Trail presently, and currently they're going to be temporarily relocating at least to Peabody to occupy, so there's a presence, you know, the building is still not mothballed, and so they're one of, when I think of Public Works, they're a division within Public Works.
thanks.
And I am being the only person here from the public safety subgroup, will report on our activities. Over the last month, our main goal has been to get a better understanding of where the police and fire staff in particular, where they are relative to what they believe the building condition to be. And one of the operating challenges with the public safety component is that we believe that many of our neighbors in town may not understand the degree to which the buildings are in a relatively poor state of condition. The West Concord Fire Station, I think, might be a little bit more clear to folks in town because it's a historic building and it's clearly very small when you go by, and so you can imagine that that doesn't maybe meet modern standards. But when you drive past the one on Walden Street, as I have done for the last 25 years, and thought, oh, well, at least that building's in good shape, right? As it turns out, it isn't inside, and you know, our tours of the building as well as our conversations with staff have revealed that there are some pretty significant issues with that building, some of which have to do with the building, some of which are related to the site itself. So these conversations are ongoing. And really what we're encouraging the police and fire folks to help us with is to better understand issues with capacity, issues with condition, and issues with location. So we're using a very simple 3 criteria framework. So is the building too small? Is the building too small from an employee point of view? Is it too small from, say, accommodating the correct number of fire trucks or other kinds of fire equipment or EMS? So are there capacity issues? Are there condition issues with respect to, you know, the interior, the building materials, flooding concerns, so on and so forth? And then are there issues with the location? Since public safety, of course, the location is largely driven by the ability to respond to emergencies in a timely manner. And there are state guidelines with regard to how quickly police and fire need to be able to respond to a call and so on and so forth. And one of the challenges we have, and I think it's a challenge across all 3 of the groups, is moving from impressions to data and moving from impressions to evidence. So the idea that we go into the building and think that the building might not be in great shape, that's certainly, sort of an important piece of qualitative evidence because we can see what's before us, but we don't really understand what would it cost to upgrade at that particular location versus what does it cost to build new in a different location? What does it mean if they move from location A to location B in terms of response time? What does it mean in terms of capacity? Mark's point about, planning for current capacity, for example, fire station staff, that's a per capita, typically a per capita standard. So the size of the community directly impacts the number of firefighters, for example, that you would be required to have. Ditto for the police, looser standards for police, but standards nonetheless. So having population projections that are tied to all of these different developments that are happening at the moment, but also trying to understand future growth and the composition of the population in Concord. All of these things need to be factored into the decision-making. And in particular, if we're going to be talking about building a new fire station, police and fire station, any combination of these in sort of a new project form, we would be going back to our residents and asking for a pretty significant capital outlay. And in order to make that argument, it needs to be more than people going into the building and recognizing that it's maybe not in good shape. So we need data about standards. We need to have an understanding and evaluation of the building conditions that's done by a professional, so on and so forth. So moving from impressions to evidence so that we can come back to our neighbors and fellow taxpayers and make a really solid understanding and argument about why we would need a significant capital outlay. So that's where we are. We're sort of in the moving through understanding the needs, looking at possible future alternative locations, but also trying to understand the real nature of the argument that has financial components to it, service components to it, and so forth. So that's where we are.
Mark has his hand.
Mark, I'm sure has Mark, would you like to add anything on to my overview of what we've been up to?
No, I thought the overview was fantastic. I guess the only footnote, Judith, is that, and I think you mentioned it before, if you took a poll of the town, I'd be shocked if more than 5% understood the conditions that the police and fire are working under. So I think we do have to do some balancing. We don't want to, I don't think it's so bad that we need to scare people or that it's dangerous per se. But I do think that we do have to start thinking about how to use the data to make recommendations and then how to message it so that people aren't surprised. We shouldn't be surprising anyone if in, a year or two, whatever the time frame is, and the public's reaction is, well, gee, I didn't know we needed a new police department. And it's not feasible to have 14,000 people, voters go through, take the tours that we did. So I do think there's a little bit of a PR issue that at some point, I think we need to make part of our recommendation. Because in some of the conversations I've had with people, they just have no comprehension as to some of the conditions. And when I talk about conditions, I'm talking about flooding, I'm talking about electrical systems, I'm talking about, sort of things that people can't see from the outside.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Mark, and I think in the other working groups as well, we've talked about developing a communication strategy. At some point that will help folks in town, our neighbors understand exactly where we're coming from, because there's a bunch of different buildings and a bunch of different issues and needs and so forth, so we need to come up with a communication strategy, but we're still gathering data, and everybody's getting to understand all the different sites. I think we're almost there, actually. I feel like we've come a long way in 2.5 months. But I think we will definitely need to figure out how to communicate what it is we've learned over 2.5 months to everybody else in town, right? So I think that's a great point. Paul?
When you talk about public safety, you have fire and police. We tend to talk about them together. And as far as locations, there are different criteria, from what I understand. I mean, fire needs to be in at least 2 locations. I don't know what police need to be, the criteria for location may be different because they're mobile, they're over town. And then to your point about, do we need separate facilities or one facility? I know these are decisions in progress, but should we be talking about them separately? Because I think the criteria may be quite different.
Oh, well, I would say there's a lot of overlap, but they are different in some
Yeah.
respects, and
And what they have in common is that the facilities are not in great shape, they're not modern, and but I think the location part is quite.
Well, one way to
Yeah.
think of that, I think, is is response time. So the police have a slightly higher bar in terms of response time. Meaning that they can be, for example, I'm just throwing numbers out there, but there are numbers, but these are examples. So you could be 10 minutes to to respond to a police call. But for fire, you want 90% of your calls to be responded to within 8 minutes or 9 minutes, right? So police has a little bit more wiggle room.
And you also have fire trucks that are in place, and you have police that are more mobile.
Well, yes, because so the police are at any given time all over town and so on and so forth. So we're thinking about all of these things. We actually did ask the chiefs that question, and much like the argument around municipal consolidation and sort of being able to be in person and so forth, they did suggest that there was some overlap that was beneficial. And there's functional overlap, like using training spaces and conference rooms and so forth. But also they felt that there was enough commonality in their work that it was very helpful to be to have the chiefs in the same building, the staff get to know each other and so on and so forth. So all of this is on the table, and excellent questions. All right. Any questions from the floor about the subgroup work? Anybody out there? No? All right, so fortunately, I think the next few items should be pretty quick. So the next item is discussing funding for studies. So I know that Carrie and Megan have been working on letting us know if there's going to be a little pot of money that we can draw upon for specific studies. So an example might be if we wanted to do an evaluation of the environmental conditions at Peabody. If we wanted to do an evaluation of the Walden Street Public Safety Facility, do we have little pockets of money? So I'll let Megan take it away.
Sure, thank you. So yes, Carrie had been planning to come, this afternoon, but something came up, so she wasn't able to make it. And, she is finalizing, a memo to the land use working group to address the concept of funding, but, was comfortable with me sharing some points for you today. So I wanted to share that the town, did allocate $150,000 in ARPA funding to support facilities study focused on Concord Public Works and the Walden Street Public Safety Buildings. So these are two top priorities that were identified in the 2020 municipal facilities assessment. And I'm not sure how, in the weeds, everyone is, the select board is pretty aware of how our ARPA funding works, but it's under the authority of the town manager, who has presented the projects, in consultation and discussion with the select board over the last several years. And we had some deadlines regarding appropriating the funds to certain projects. And so those deadlines have since passed. So we have, this scope for this scope that I'm discussing right now was written prior to the charge for this group. So we have this agreement to spend ARPA funds on these two projects, or two, public works and public safety. And ARPA funds they have to all be spent by December 31st, 2026. So, kind of coordinating the charge of this group and the ability to spend those funds, I think will take some conversation and integration. But, her perspective was to use these funds for a little bit more detailed site-specific feasibility work that builds off of this group's recommendations. So kind of like you said, like more refined site evaluations, infrastructure, constraint analysis, potentially zoning and permitting considerations, or conceptual cost modeling. And so kind of thinking about, this is a 12-month or so period that is in the charge. We have a little bit longer than that to spend the money, but, the way I'm kind of lining it up is in thinking about this, where you all are in the spring, if you have areas of focus that you need additional analysis, depending on the work requested, or, the work that we're gonna try to, how much time do we need, working backwards to get that done by the end of December. So it's like in the spring, you have a sense of, this is where we're going, we need these assessments done or evaluations done, and then scope that out, procure, and have that work done by the end of December. So that's where we are today. I'm happy to hear any comments and take it back to the town manager for further discussion.
Do we have funding outside of DPW and, I'm sorry, I can't remember the other thing that you said. DPW.
So it's the ARPA funding to support facility study focused on public works and public safety.
So if we wanted to do an assessment of Peabody, do we have access to funding for that? Or do you guys have access for that?
It's a good question. I think if how fine grained you wanna get to, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that, cause I don't think this is so specific that it's like you have to look at, public works where it is right now, or public safety where it is right now. It's like if you were looking at other places for these programs, I think that would be okay. But, is Peabody really needing that? I'm not sure.
I'm
So
not sure.
I think I would need to look back at the agreement to see if, Peabody work would fall into this category.
Okay, cause I think
think
that's
that-
urgent.
Yeah, it is, it's
Yeah,
urgent,
yeah.
it certainly can't wait till
Right.
next spring.
So if it's not this,
And this topic came up in a different conversation, or I think it was about housing or something, anyway, and, the discussion there was about how much flexibility do we have once we wrote down how we were gonna spend this money, how rigid was that, and how much flexibility?
Mhm.
And from what I read in that conversation, there was more flexibility than we thought originally. So I'm hoping that we have the flexibility to spend this money, and I would like to spend it soon. Because I think having the, in fact, I was hoping we would be ready to actually put together an RFP to get an environmental assessment for Peabody, because this is kind of pivotal to the work that the subcommittee's doing. So
an environment, like a phase one or like a phase?
An environmental workplace, like,
That's kind of a phase one. That's not, we're not doing investigation or using sampling or
Yeah,
anything, it's
sampling.
really to look at.
Yeah, sampling or-
Where is it?
That's beyond phase one, right? Phase one is more, paperwork.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I
and I
don't
think it
know-
would
I
have to
don't
be
know what you-
pretty quick. I, might defer to Westwood in the context of Peabody. Because we need to be able to answer a very simple question that Mary has posed multiple times, which is for our community members, how would it be okay to move employees or council on aging into a
or
building that was
preschool or carousel, right?
that was not suitable for school children? So we need to be able to answer that question. And
Prior to any renovation.
Yeah.
oh, an environmental assessment for the building.
Yes.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Sorry.
Exactly.
Suitability and safety.
That's right.
That's-
You weren't,
that's a big-
you weren't at our last meeting, but so it seems like we need to have an answer for that. If we're gonna seriously consider Peabody.
But to be fair, under phase one, but we need to define the scope a little bit.
Or phase one,
Phase one is a paper study, existing
I don't know what that
information.
What's
means.
that?
Well, it's due diligence
I
language.
still don't.
Okay, okay, it's this.
For the land.
You know what due diligence is? Okay.
Kind of, but there's also,
So there's
you can do diligence about a lot of things. Yeah. So what are the due
Environment-
diligence thing about?
environmental due diligence.
Yeah,
Well, environmental due diligence light is just look at existing information, what you know about the facility.
yeah,
Environmental due diligence medium
yeah,
is if you do that, plus you may wanna do some sampling, cause like pull down the ceiling, there's,
Okay.
asbestos.
okay.
Now, the facilities assessment that was done on Peabody way back when, it identified hazardous materials on that site. I don't know what data they had. They identified PCBs and asbestos and some other stuff. It's right in that report. But,
So what do you think we need, Paul? Or two?
I think we need somebody with eyes on the building to not rely on
So
just a piece of
Is
paper.
this a
I think
phase
we need
one
somebody-
or two?
Hmm?
Is this a
we
phase
definitely
two
need
due
sampling,
diligence?
so I.
We need
Russ?
more than phase, we need more than phase.
It's a phase.
How's Russ you?
Yeah, you wanna do a phase two, the phase one's been completed, plus, we know a lot of locations where there's minor amounts of asbestos in that building. There, a lot of stuff had been removed already. So there's just a little bit in there, but you wanna do a phase two on there, and get some sampling.
Yeah.
Lead paint, PCBs like I was talking about, windows were replaced, most of the PCB. Sealants have already been taken out of the building, they're all fairly new windows, 7 years old possibly.
And the HVAC and the air quality. What about?
Well, you wouldn't be doing air quality testing right now, so all the systems are shut off. We're trying to, but we can do it, but.
Yeah.
No, I see over
Yeah,
there.
we can go turn everything on, and they come and do air quality testing. You definitely wanna do, test the asbestos, get limits on the asbestos, see what's they'll give us estimates on remediation costs.
Okay, so,
And all of that, and in addition, while we're moving to such a fast pace, I wanna get some money together. To 10,000 for a conceptual study for the space layout of Peabody. So we can get that taken care of at the same time, if you don't know what could fit in there, why are we talking about it?
okay, so you just added that.
So those are two separate,
Two separate,
Line items.
two separate parallel activities, we've already got some preliminary stuff done with a local architect. We sought this out, we wanna bring them in and finish it off, they understand the project, they understand the process.
How much do you think these two separate studies would cost?
Depends on the amount of testing, once you get a guy in there or person in there for, the level two.
Yeah.
Yeah, under $200 per sample on some things, some less on others. So if you get 10 samples, it's one price, if you get 100 samples, it's another price. But you want an LSP, licensed site professional in there, or, licensed professional in there to say, we only need these many samples. You wanna have the right number of samples for the right price, so. I don't know, it could be up to, it's another $7,000 to $10,000 price range.
Oh, I was gonna say more than that.
Yeah, I'm just saying on the low side, because we know a lot of
What do you
it's taken out, we got earlier.
It's five figures.
Is it $50,000 that you need,
Less than,
25? I mean,
Yeah.
some number, and what it seems like, if there's. I would say that there are probably two sources of funding for this, one is ARPA, and the other is non-ARPA town funds, and that it would be well to look at both of those, because
and
the work needs to be done.
yes,
I don't
current
think that-
conceptual, for the conceptual, space planning, that current baseline is 7,500. If you want more work, you'll get more money, so it'll be up to 10. And I would say cap 15 on the environmental.
And do we need to roll that septic? Septic's okay?
The septic is fine right now.
Can I ask a question about the ARPA funding, Megan? Is there gonna be another update as to what's been unspent? Cause it's my understanding there's a lot of unspent money in there that can be transferred within the category. So if we needed more money for this, you can, cause you can take it from another category if it's unspent.
Yeah, there's quarterly updates, at select board
Do
meetings.
you know when the next one's gonna happen?
I think that'd be.
Probably soon.
Fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably next
I
one.
haven't heard about it in a while.
Yeah,
it's obviously.
Well, we can send along the most recent.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be, so how do we get this going?
I think you should get, Russ should get some quotes so we can see what the actual costs are.
Okay,
And I know he's been working on the conceptual layout, so you have,
I got a proposal for that and that's well within purchasing guidelines and
what was the value?
7,500.
All right, so you have 75, that's for the conceptual layout for the LSP.
15,000 I would shoot for right now.
Can you get, some?
We'll call our partners and we've dealt with other, and I've dealt with other schools and with the town, dealt with other properties, and we'll get some square foot analysis costs.
okay,
And.
so
forward that
Megan,
to
do
you
we
early
need to
next
run
week.
this by Carrie and see if this,
Yes,
if she's
But
okay?
I understand the, priority level.
Great,
and,
thank you.
I will get back to you.
Okay, good, very good, thank you.
And everybody else should be thinking about if there is something small, or even medium that they might need for their subgroups work to just begin to think about that and we can begin to have conversations. But I'm glad that this is on the table because this is
Just
Richard.
a question about, you said you're working on layouts, meaning what might go where?
Well, what we conceptualized, we had all talked about in the groups about what programs may fit into Peabody.
Okay,
And just really space fitting and then some minor design conceptual work on the entrance to see how it all works together.
so you have a list of the various programs that we're talking about, plus.
Yeah, I have talked about
ones that stand
CLA,
out.
all the stuff you guys have
Okay,
mentioned.
okay. Thank you.
And perhaps you guys could share numbers. I think it would be helpful if you felt like you had the same numbers that Russ was using in the context of Peabody, right?
Yeah.
So that you guys are on the same page. I think that'd be
That would
helpful.
be good.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so and again, everybody just keep thinking about if there's something that you feel is necessary for this phase of work. But exceeds the abilities of the volunteers around the table or town staff that we can ask for small amounts of funding. Work plan updates, this is, very, very short. We are trying to move from the needs assessment phase into criteria and evaluation, and those conversations are happening at the subgroup level, so there really isn't much to discuss.
Yeah.
Although, the only thing I will say about the work plan is that I'm very pleased. I think Sven is pleased. We're moving a little bit more quickly, to be honest, than we thought we would be at this stage. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, do all of those sorts of things. But things are going fairly well. Then turning to the next item on the agenda is the data updates. And I think Shannon and Megan were going to walk us through the folder and just reorient us to all the goodies that are in there. And then I have a couple of addendums to discuss after you're done, Shannon.
Okay. Judith, are you gonna have quorum issues if I leave? Sorry. No, I'm just up against.
We have
it.
two online,
Mark
yeah,
and
no,
Juvenile.
yeah.
Sorry,
We
I'm
have
up
5 in
against
the
it
room.
with another commitment.
We have 5 in the room. We're good. 5.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
And we're not deliberating either. This is information.
Information.
So,
Okay, so I have the folder pulled up how you would see it on your own computer, so. The first thing we have is correspondence that the group might be receiving. I think there's only one email in there, which already has been shared with you all. Then there's the general documents and reports for reference. These are some of the main town reports that we have, the hazard reduction plan and Vision Conquer, the facilities study. The facilities study, I think this feature would only work if you have access to an Adobe account. I will say they're free, so I think if you make an account, you would have this feature, but I went through and bookmarked the document. So I don't know if it'll show on here. So the thing with this document though is everything just takes a really long time to load with it. Okay, yeah, so it's bookmarked now, and even did like sub bookmarks, so you can just click around if you're looking for a specific property. We also, what we did is then we broke things down into property folders. I'm gonna skip the other folders for now. So scenario A from the facilities study, each town building that was part of that study, now has scenario A in their property folder. Some of these other folders have additional material as they've come up so far. I know, for DPW, Megan was able to pull some parking lot information, so that's also in there along with scenario A. And then another one, I know MCI Concord, we were able to build out a lot with existing materials that the advisory board has. And then the other folders in here are just, your meeting materials and minutes folder, and then Megan recently added some GIS training materials. You know, we mentioned to you all if you wanted to receive some GIS training that, we think that our GIS team would be willing to do that with you, but we're also, I know I did a GIS training, with them in the spring and I thought they recorded it, so we're also trying to track down the, recording for that training.
Do we need to train ourselves or can't we just put in a request?
For GIS, I mean, it depends on what the request is, but I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of good information that you can get without having much training in
Yeah.
GIS on there, but you know, I'm sure depending
Okay.
upon your request, yeah. Okay, then just at the bottom, we have what we're sort of referring to as, versions of the master property spreadsheet. So we're putting the dates at the end of them. The most recent one was updated by Judith that has, it's been built out significantly since its first iteration now. Then I will go back to the folder, then, Carrie's executive assistant, Matt, he, put together some information in this other spreadsheet. It's called property spreadsheet space available, and that's dated September 2nd. So this just was put into the folder this week. It has some information with square feet for buildings, parking spaces, and then, utility costs and, some other funding sources in there. He put a key at the bottom that, has some information. All right, do you have?
So this, okay, go back to that again
Yeah.
for a second, that's very helpful for us.
I know.
But I can look at it later, never mind,
Yeah,
I'll look at it later.
That was a table that,
We don't wanna stop
at
everybody.
our last meeting, that was a table that Carrie said she'd fill in for us. and that-
Yeah, Matt just put that together
There
on
it is.
Tuesday.
Good, thank you.
Well, first of all, Shannon and Megan, thank you so much, and to other folks that have helped contribute to keeping that folder
Yes.
straight, organizing the materials. The bookmarking of the TDA report is gonna be critical when we actually write our report, because it's gonna be an appendix. It will be very, very useful, so that's terrific work, and we thank you. A couple of quick updates on data. And I want to thank also and call a shout out to Russ Carlstad, who has been super helpful with all kinds of data, but also the operating cost data for all the buildings we now have in the file that is broken down into utilities and other kinds of annual carrying costs, which is hugely useful. Mimi Graney also has been wonderfully helpful, and she and I are working on the market value data for all of the different parcels, and largely doing that through the good grace of folks in our community. Commercial real estate brokers, residential real estate brokers who are gonna help us, you know, not have a transaction amount, but have a rough estimate of what we think the parcels might be worth. We're about to go to this position. Also working on the population data, and there are different wrinkles associated with that, trying to work from the state level data down, but hopefully we will have something in October that would be a basis that we can all work from. So that is my last comment on data. If you have other needs, please let us know. If you have ideas, just.
The market value that you're getting with Mimi, that's super helpful. Are you getting both rental and
Yep.
sales?
Yep. yeah, we're getting it all. And also, I will say Mimi's been working with the GIS folks, because I don't want to leave any of the town staff out who have been so incredibly helpful bringing data to us, but we're getting a map of town-owned parcels, so really trying to understand visually where are parcels, how big are they? The town owns a lot of land, a lot of them are really teensy, but where is everything? And also looking at larger scale parcels that may or may not be owned by the town, might be owned privately, might be owned by another level of government that could be, you know, useful for any of these land uses. So I think we're making great progress, really pleased. When's our next meeting, Shannon?
It would be the 26th. It's every 3 weeks on Fridays. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just have to leave, but Megan's gonna, stay.
I think we're pretty much done. Is there any other comments from the floor
Yeah, through Fridays.
before we have a motion to adjourn?
Thank you.
All right, motion adjourn. I'm still, you know, I'm the content chair, not the admin chair, so we all miss Sven, but he'll be back next time. So thanks everybody for coming. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, there we go. Thanks very much, folks. See you next time.